Our text, Ecclesiastes 7:8, says in its entirety, better is the end of a matter than the beginning, but then it adds, better to be patient than to show a haughty spirit. Well, if we're patient, sometimes a very grim-looking circumstance becomes much better in the end than we could have ever imagined at the beginning. Well, would you have a Bible example where this principle actually plays out that way? 1 Kings chapter 20, please. 1 Kings 20. King Ben-Hadad of Syria and 32 other kings are fighting against Israel. So the beginning is not looking very good for Israel. In fact, if you look at verse 7, 1 Kings 20, verse 7, it says that the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, "Take note, please, and see this man, Ben-Hadad, is bent on bringing calamity, for he demanded my wives, my sons, my silver, and my gold, and I did not refuse him." Well, pretty bleak-looking circumstances. But then after another interchange between the two kings, it's obvious that Ben-Hadad was haughty. In verse 10, you can almost see him swaggering when he says, "So may the gods do to me and add to it if there's enough dust in Samaria to give each of the people following me a handful." Well, again, the beginning looks grim. But then Ahab, in response, he basically uses the principle of our text for today. In verse 11, the king of Israel answered, "Tell him the one who puts on his armor," you see, in the beginning, "should not boast about himself like the one who takes it off in the end." Well, the end of the matter proved to be much better for Israel. Verse 21 says that the king of Israel inflicted a great defeat on the Syrians. Better was the end of the matter than its beginning. Oh, do we have another example where it states it very similarly? Yes, Judges 15. This is one of the accounts about Samson. And Samson wreaked havoc. He wreaked destruction upon the Philistines. So much so that they are now coming to Judah in all-out revenge. Well, the men of Judah realize this, and they're worried about being slaughtered. So they caught up with Samson and handed him over to the Philistines. In 15:13, the situation appears grim for Samson at first. 13 says, in the last sentence, they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the crag. Well, the haughty Philistines were thrilled to have him bound and just handed over to them. In fact, in verse 14, it says, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted triumphantly at meeting him. They couldn't wait to get their hands on him. Well, how did the situation for Samson prove better in the end than at the beginning? Well, the verse says that Jehovah's Spirit empowered him and the fetters just melted off his hands. And then 15 and 16, Samson finds the jawbone of a donkey and he struck down 1,000 Philistines. For Samson, the end of the matter was better than the beginning. Well, how about Job? Job 42. Job 42, we're all familiar with how Job's tests in the beginning were so troublesome. One tragic circumstance after another, and then he was humiliated with verbal abuse from his false comforters. It can't get much worse than that. But because of his endurance and patience, how did it turn out in the end? Well, verse 12 sounds very much like our text for today. Job 42:12, it says, so Jehovah blessed the last part of Job's life more than the beginning. Well, how has this scripture, Ecclesiastes 7:8, been treated in our literature? How has it been applied? A couple of examples. A 1998 Watchtower applied it to parents counseling their children. Now, for some, during their teen years, they go through a phase in life, and their attitude is very frustrating to the parent. In fact, during the teen years, sometimes a parent will think there's no hope for this child. But if they're patient, what often results? Well, we've read countless experiences in our magazines, heard them on JW Broadcasting, of a wayward teen who is now an adult faithfully serving Jehovah. Better was the end of the matter than its beginning. A 1994 Watchtower applied this to one who he feels that he's being overlooked for privileges. Well, instead of manifesting a prideful spirit, how much better to wait patiently. In time, when that privilege comes our way, the end of the matter is much better than at first. Some years ago, an older brother who had been serving as an elder moved to a new congregation. Well, the elders in the new congregation did not reappoint him right away. A couple years went by, and he was appointed as a ministerial servant, not an elder. Well, a couple more years went by, and the former elder is now doing a slow burn inside. And it manifested itself in his comments, even being critical of some of the decisions of the elders. Well, please find Philippians 2 with me. One of the elders on that body spoke to the brother, and he explained that with his current disturbed attitude, it's very unlikely the body of elders would welcome him aboard. He explained that his attitude was rooted in his view of position, and the elder used Philippians 2, 5 through 9. Now, verse 5 counsels were to have the mental attitude of Jesus. Well, what was Jesus' attitude about position? Verse 6, it's talking about position. It says that Jesus did not try to seize Jehovah's position. And verse 7, just the opposite of going up the ladder, Jesus was willing to go down the ladder, to assume a lower position, become a human. And then verse 8 says, more than that, when he came as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, yes, death on a torture stake. And then the bottom line in verse 9, for this very reason. For what reason? Because of Jesus' humble attitude in accepting a lesser assignment to do Jehovah's further will. And what was the result? The verse continues, for this very reason, God exalted him to a superior position, gave him a name above every other name. Well, the elder asked the brother if he thought that he was manifesting the mental attitude of Jesus. And that brother said no. He said, I'm too caught up in the position of being an elder. So the elder asked him, well, what are you going to do? The older brother said, I need to reach out for the office of overseer all over again and stop sulking about my position. Well, what was the result? For years, he had not been reappointed as an elder. 6 months after that conversation, the body of elders unanimously recommended he be appointed as an elder. Why? Ecclesiastes 7:8, better to be patient than haughty in spirit. Well, that older brother, he died some years later, happily serving as an elder. Better was the end of the matter than its beginning. Another application of the verse, the beginning in the rebellion in Eden, it looked very bleak for the human family, but Jehovah had an arrangement to rectify matters. Jesus cooperated, and what does that result in for you and I if we remain faithful? No question about it. Our reward at the end of the system will be better than at the first.